Can you imagine a world where kindness is at the heart of all of us? That's a world worth leaving to our children. Welcome to Love, Laughter and Kindness, where kindness is more than an idea, it's a movement. Brought to you by Zorzle, with inspiring guests as we laugh, reflect and imagine a kinder future together. Well, I'm delighted to say I have Hugh Mackay in our precious studio, online studio today. Hugh, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, David, and I'm delighted to be having a conversation with you.
Well, you're very, very kind. I'm absolutely amazed, Hugh, when I look at your career, and, I've done a little bit of research and so on, but you've done so many things. And when we spoke the other day, you said that you started off as a researcher and you've now become an advocate.
Yes.
So do you want to tease that out a little bit?
Yes. Actually, that arose just a couple of weeks ago when someone was interviewing me and said, reading your work, I think there's been a change. And I thought back, yes, well, there has been a change. I mean, I started in research straight out of school as a callow 16-year-old. I did my university qualifications as a part-time evening student. So I've been very deeply immersed in research. And for most of my career, of course, I've been obsessed with the scientific method, making sure that my research is well designed and carefully executed and the data is properly interpreted. And I must keep myself out of it. I must be as impartial as possible. And even when I started writing books based on the research, the first one was in 1993. I started quite late, David. I was already 55 before my first book was published.
Wow.
But that was very much like a presentation of my research. It wasn't me talking about what I think should happen. It was strictly, here's what's going on in Australia at the moment. And I followed that through to about, I think, 2016. I published a book called The Good Life at the suggestion of my then publisher, Pan Macmillan. And they said, you've done all this research, but how would you apply it? How should we act on all this? And so that was bringing together a lot of research, but also a lot of my long-term interest in ethics. And so the title of the book, The Good Life, was sort of meaning the opposite of how we normally use that term. I was talking about good in the moral sense, a life of goodness. What could that mean? So that was a turning point for me. I've since then done a number of books of social analysis, Australia Reimagined and The Way We Are.
Yes.
In 2024. But even in those books, I have allowed myself to say a little bit about, to reflect on, in a personal way, to reflect on what these findings might mean. And so it is a change, and I'm now happy to say, I think, I'm not doing any more research. I'm no longer spending my life sitting in people's lounge rooms listening to their life stories. And I miss that, I must say. That was my lifeblood. Yes. But now I've entered a more reflective phase, and I'm very happy to say, well, that's the state of the nation, and it's not a happy state. We are looking at a society, for example, in 2026, in which our number one public health issue is social isolation.
Yes.
Because of all the things that follow from that. It's a health issue, increased risk of loneliness, which we now recognise as a disease, anxiety, depression, hypertension, inflammation, sleep disorders, vulnerability, even reduced life expectancy. So we're not in a happy state. A third of Australians in 2026 are reporting that they feel lonely. A third of adults are reporting that they feel lonely most of the time. 43% of 18 to 24-year-olds, and they're the most connected generation in history, but they're reporting that they feel lonely most of the time for the obvious reason that their connection is not via eye contact, but via a screen. Anyway, I'm digressing, but so we look at the state of society, and I've been studying it for a long time, but now I think it is time to say, okay, we know these things which I've been reporting on for so long what are we going to do about it? What, as a society, as individuals, what can we do to address the very obvious social problems that Australia is now, and not just Australia, it's very much a Western phenomenon we're talking about.
It's amazing, really, when you think of things. I mean, as you know, I've got this kindness project I've been working on and trying to get a kindness movement happening amongst children, with children playing games that are kind and teach empathy and compassion and those sorts of things. And so that's been my focus for a number of years. And your kindness book, The Kindness Revolution, was such a wonderful boon to me. And to what I'm attempting to achieve. I noted something. I watched the speech of an astronaut, a doctor, who was on that recent flight, and he spoke at Harvard. His name is Johnny Kim, and he was son of I don't know what original country his mother came from, but of Asian extraction. There were a couple of very interesting things there. One, he enrolled after 9/11 in the military, and he said the reason he did that was because he wanted to be a hero. And you know, as kids, we watch all kinds of things where these are wonderful people to emulate, and you know, they're normally tough and beat people up very easily, and all this sort of thing. And he talked of the regrets that he had because in an incident in a war zone, he made a decision that killed an innocent man, and he carries that as a grief. But he then went on to study medicine, which was to try and help him deal with this, you know, to make a better life for himself, and to help him deal with his grief. And he talked in the speech about the support the professors gave him, recognizing the trauma that he was carrying. Then he talks about being in a shuttle and looking back at the Earth, and you've heard this before from other astronauts, and they have this revelation and they look at this globe, which looks so beautiful from space, and they think, you know, all these different nations, these different people, these barriers, these fences we have, we're all on that one ship together.
Yes.
You know, we're all part of the one family.
Yes.
And that was really quite a lovely thing. And then he talked about the need for compassion and empathy and so on. Now, Hugh, in your book, your latest book, I think it is, correct me if I'm wrong, you have included a definition of kindness.
Yes.
Can you speak about that for me?
Yes. We use the word so glibly and freely. I think it is important to just reflect on what we actually mean. And to understand my definition, we just need to remind ourselves of what it means to be human. We humans, and that astronaut story reinforces this, we humans are members of a social species, which means we're hopeless in isolation. We are at our worst when we're being individualistic. We are at our best when we're connecting, when we're engaging. We need communities, groups, families, neighbourhoods, colleagues, ukulele bands, book clubs, whatever it is, to nurture us, to sustain us, to give us that all-important sense of belonging.
Yeah.
So fundamental to our mental and emotional health because of the kind of species we belong to. Now, I think it's fair to say we don't really know who we are until we know where we belong.
Yes.
And the sign that we belong is that other people acknowledge us, other people take us seriously, other people appreciate us, include us, notice us, talk to us, smile, all those things. And so I would define kindness against that background. I would define kindness as anything we do that shows another person that we take them seriously. Anything we do that shows them that they belong here, that they're not overlooked, they're not marginalized, they're not ignored, but they're included and appreciated and acknowledged. I heard a very sad, a very disturbing story a few years ago about a young man in Canberra. Young, I mean early 20s, 22 or 23.
Yes.
Who attempted to take his own life by jumping off a bridge. He survived, and his rescuer said, and this has stayed with me, I mean, it's a searing thing to hear. His rescuer said the first thing this young man said to him was, if someone had smiled at me, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have jumped.
Yeah.
Now, just imagine on the very threshold of adulthood, feeling so excluded, ignored, marginalised, whatever it was, that you were ready to end it all, and even a smile. And that's true, even a smile. Saying
Yes.
today, acknowledging, so don't stand at a bus stop beside a stranger and pretend they're not there. Say hello. It looks like rain. The bus is running late again, whatever you feel like saying. And in many ways, the most eloquent act of kindness that we ever perform for each other is what you're doing right now, David, which is listening. When we listen to another person, we are saying in a way that's not only eloquent and powerful, but also, I think, therapeutic. We're saying, I take you seriously enough to bother listening to what you're saying. I'm prepared to entertain your ideas. And by the way, I might disagree with everything you're going to say.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. At the moment, you have the floor, and it's my job to listen and to take seriously what you're saying, even if we're about to have an argument about it. Nothing wrong with having an argument. Samuel Johnson, 250 years ago, wrote something about this which I think is very wise and memorable. That is, kindness is in our power, even when fondness is not.
Yes.
And I think that's the most beautiful thing to know about this species that we belong to. Being human, being true to our essential nature as cooperative beings, being true to what Abraham Lincoln so poetically once described as the better angels of our nature. Being true to that nature means we are capable of showing kindness even to people we don't like. We're capable of showing kindness even to people we could never agree with about religion or politics or music or culture or sport or whatever you like. Doesn't matter. We're capable of showing kindness towards total strangers because kindness is a unique form of human love.
Yes.
All forms of human love are wonderful, of course, romantic, familial, companionate. Where would we be without the love of friends, family, etc.? But all of those forms of love have this one thing in common, that they are about our emotions. They're about our feelings towards each other. Even when we say, more trivially, I love dogs, or I love chocolate, or I love that book, we're talking about an emotional response. But here's where kindness is in a completely different category. Kindness is not about our emotions. Kindness is about our humanity. Kindness is not about our feelings towards each other. It's about our acknowledgement of the humanity that we all share. It's the only form of human love, and I think it is a form of human love, but it's the only form of human love that is emotionless, doesn't call on us to feel anything about the person. We're being kind because we're being true to the essence of our nature. It's not just a nice thing to do to be kind to someone. This is actually a species survival skill.
I love that, a species survival skill. Yes. No, that's wonderful.
And by the way, that's been demonstrated literally from a group of archaeologists working, British and German archaeologists working in Europe. They believe they have found the answer, and this is absolutely on the topic we're discussing. They believe they found the answer to a question which has puzzled archaeologists and anthropologists for decades, which is 42,000 years ago, a cataclysmic climatic event hit the planet Earth and wiped out 4 of the 5 species of human that had been roaming the planet for between 200,000 and 300,000 years. Big question. Why did we survive, Homo sapiens, why did we survive when the Neanderthals, Homo erectus, a couple of others were wiped out? Did we have bigger brains? Could we run faster? What was the story? No, none of that. These archaeologists have come to the conclusion that it was our ability to have formed ourselves into small, mutually supportive, mutually dependent communities, sharing resources, caring for the sick. In a very memorable phrase, one of the archaeologists said, it was our emotional vulnerability to each other that turned out to be our greatest strength. Another one said, this was a case of survival of the kindest. In other words, we we'd learned to all the species of humans were tribal, but only we had become communitarians, with this idea of small, closely knit communities powered by all those qualities we need in order to cooperate, chief among them, kindness.
That's so beautiful. I was trying to find, I just couldn't find it then. Did you receive that thing I sent you, which was about human biology? It was about
Yes.
not the organisms, but how the body works together to protect itself, and that's also a sense of community of how, that shows how we survive as a person.
Well, that's right. And that biologist said what neuroscientists are now saying too, which is, and it's implicit in what I said about our survival 42,000 years ago, that we are not by nature competitive.
No.
We are by nature cooperative. Neuroscientists say they can look into the human brain and they can find the cooperative centre. Same as they can find the language centre and other centres. But there is no such thing as the competitive centre. That's something that is a learned social response in certain circumstances, which can easily bring out the worst in us. I mean, if you multiply up, the ultimate form of competition is war. Well, no one's going to say war promotes social harmony or cooperation or the survival of the species. The opposite impact. But our essence, when we're being true to our DNA, is to be cooperative and therefore to show kindness, compassion, tolerance, inclusiveness, even towards, just back to the Samuel Johnson quote, even towards people we don't happen to like. It's nothing to do with that. It's to do with our shared humanity. And this is not about, it's not a soft option. This is not about being a doormat.
No.
You can terminate a relationship kindly. You can have a knockdown, drag-out argument kindly and respectfully. You can discipline a child kindly. It's a way of being in the world that promotes social harmony, which is the only way our species can survive.
There have been so many wonderful examples of what you're talking about there, Hugh. I worked for Red Cross at one stage, and I fell in love with the founder of Red Cross. I knew the story, but it's kind of been, there should have been movies made about that wonderful man. He's going through a field in the middle of a war, and he discovers people are dying because there are no hospitals, because no one is able to care for them, and they're dying for a lack of water. Something as simple as that. And Henri Dunant decides to, set up a field hospital and so on. Out of all this, the concept that becomes the Geneva Convention eventually, which is to say that, if you're an enemy in a war, as long as you've got a gun and can use it, or a weapon and can use it. But the moment that you haven't got a weapon, you're no longer an enemy. So hospitals, if they're following the Geneva Convention, and soldiers, they will care for the person from the other side. They will save their lives. They won't just, kill a maimed person. So, that's so powerful. What would it look like if we were to have a measure in government policy, in businesses, in education, and so on, that actually was a measure of kindness? So we look at the policy we're trying to bring in, whatever it is, whatever area it's in, and we say, is this going to be kind? Is there kindness in this to our voters, to our constituents, and perhaps even to other nations?
Yes.
How would it look? Is it possible, do you think?
I certainly think it's possible, and it would be a transformation. I'm uncomfortable with the word measure, and I'm not sure we can measure this, but governments are absolutely accustomed to saying, we test this against the economics. Is this going to be good for the economy? And increasingly governments will say, is this fair? Is this just? It's just a matter of adding to the list of criteria. And we've seen it. We saw it with Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, for example. Just a matter of adding to the list of criteria the question, is this kind? And I dream of the day, and I hope this dream comes true. I dream of the day when it's absolutely routine for governments, when they're reviewing a piece of legislation, parliamentarians, not just governments, for all of our parliamentary representatives to apply that question. Well, is this kind? Is this fair? Is it just? Is it economically responsible? Yeah, all that stuff. Is it kind? And what that means
there's
is
a person that
does
I to
respect
interview
our common humanity.
Tuesday.
Isn't
had hoped
inclusive?
we
Does
might
it
have had her
show
on our
compassion?
discussion today. I think
it's not all. We don't want it to be all about the head.
You.
We want it to
There's a lady, excuse me, a lady called Julie.
Not in the sense of, as I said
and
earlier, in
on
response to the
Facebook,
Samuel Johnson
she
quote,
calls
not in the
herself
sense of,
Michael's mum.
just in the sense of acknowledging our common humanity. We are, as the astronaut said, we're all one. We're all earthlings on this planet. Yes.
So Michael's mum writes some brilliant stuff. And for example, the other day she talks about how difficult it was when her son has a disability, and I'm not sure about her other child. But so there's a lot of challenges for this young lady. And she woke up at 5 by her 5-year-old at 4:30 in the morning, and the 5-year-old was having a deep philosophical discussion about whether or not she wanted to drop ballet next term. But by 5 a.m., after such important talks, I was wide awake. So I decided to design my own country. I'll just read you a little bit of this and then we'll come back to talking. Welcome to Caretopia, she says. Caretopia is in many ways just like Australia. However, unlike Australia, in Caretopia, we realise that perhaps the entire economy quietly relies on unpaid carers not collapsing in a heap behind the laundry door, so we made a few small policy changes. Firstly, every parent of a high support needs child receives one government-funded emergency lie-down per week. During this time, a trained professional appears magically in your home for an hour and says things like, I've got this, and you go have a coffee. Right? You stare at them suspiciously because nobody except for your mother or spouse has ever said this before. And it goes on, and she's brilliant with the things she writes. But as I look at, for example, and I think you also know that I run a small disability business, and many of my clients are really terribly worried about the possible changes to the NDIS, and they're asking each other, what are you going to do if you lose your supports? And they depend on this to live reasonable lives. And we take some of them on respite, which means that parents get a break and carers who are their permanent carers get a break, which is also wonderful. My cousin would be 82 if he was alive now. He was born with a significant disability, never talked, and his parents did absolutely everything for him because there were no supports back then. So they bathed him, they washed him, they shaved him, they dressed him, they fed him, they hand-fed him. Anyway, so I look at this obviously through the lens of kindness and say, what should we be doing? How should we be looking at our tax system? How should we be looking at what we do for people with disabilities, what we do for women in the workforce? How do we address domestic violence? All these sorts of, a whole host of things. What do you feel that you've learned over these many years now? And I mean, I could go through the list of the titles of your books alone are fantastic. So how would you respond to that, Hugh?
Well, first of all, on the NDIS, that, of course, was an initiative essentially powered by kindness. That was a good example of Caretopia in action. I love that concept. That's in the case of people who need specialist care, or specialised care. But there is a message here for all of us, and this is central to what my research has taught me over the years, and that is that we are all neighbours. And I think we have forgotten that. When you look at the level of loneliness, when you look at the appallingly low percentage of people who feel they can trust their neighbours or who feel their neighbours, it's, I think, only about 50% of people who think they could call on their neighbours in a crisis, which is untrue. Generally speaking, we can. But we know what it means to be a member of a family. We know what it means to be a friend or a colleague, etc. I think we've forgotten what it means to be a neighbour. And when we're talking about the state of the nation, I like to encourage people to bring that down to a street-by-street proposition. There are these things you don't like about contemporary Australian society. How is it in your street?
Yes.
The state of the nation starts in your street. And if we are not being neighbourly, if we're not being kind, if we're not looking out for the socially isolated, if we're not putting pressure on someone who's edging towards violence or delinquency of some kind, if we're not acting like supportive neighbours to each other, then I don't think we're entitled to complain about the state of the nation. We have to do our bit, street by street, house by house, neighbour by neighbour, so that in Caretopia there would be a neighbour who'd come in to an overstressed, caring parent and say, go and have a lie down or a cup of coffee. I'll handle this for a while. I'll do the washing up or, whatever it is. And neighbours do that for each other. I mean, I've, over the years, been deeply moved by some of the stories I've heard about streets, suburbs, towns, where there is a powerful sense of neighbourliness and where people don't just feel as though they belong, but they feel as though they are supported, as though they can rely on other people. And if I need to get my hair done, I've got a neighbour who'll look after the 3 kids for a couple of hours while I go to the hairdresser or something. That happens, but it seems to be happening less. And I think we do need to be reminded, and this is the kind of thing our leaders could be reminding us of. We do need to remember that our responsibility as citizens includes our responsibility as neighbours. If we think this place is not as kind as it should be, not as compassionate, too violent, people are too impatient, there's not enough time spent just chatting to people and making them feel included. Well, that's not a government issue. Do it.
Do something
if you dream
about it.
of that kind of society, live in your own street as if it is that kind of society. And street by street, we gradually change the character of our society. That's the only way it can happen. It can't happen from the top. Your initiative of encouraging kids in school settings and playing games, etc., to think about, I think that's brilliant. In the same way, I think parents often stress, both working, the kids come home from school. Is there time to sit down and have a little chat? Often parents just say things like, what did you learn today? Or how was school or something? I think we need to, with our kids particularly, put kindness back on the agenda and say, who were you kind to today? Or was someone kind to you today? Or did you see someone being kind today? Get kids' radar tuned to the idea that kindness is how we all should be. And if we're not being kind, there's something wrong with us.
Yeah. Look, I couldn't agree more with that. Hugh, with when 9/11 happened, I was actually working for a charity and I was in Uganda on the day that all the airports in the world closed. And I was about to leave. I was headed a small overseas aid organisation in Australia, and I was heading to Europe to look at some of the work we were doing there and meet some other people who were travelling with me to do that. But the airports were all closed, and we had no idea of what was happening. And then one of the people in the party went upstairs at the Entebbe airport and came back and described the picture of the planes flying into the World Trade Centers, which was horrendous and then terribly scary. And so we had no idea what was happening at all. At that time, I desperately hoped that America and the rest of the world wouldn't respond in kind. And I mean not kind. I mean the other type of kind. And of course they didn't. So I'm going to just take 2 minutes to share with you the poem I've written about the fellow I told you about the other day. An extraordinary man. He was actually a Jewish rabbi, and he moved his family to Nebraska. And when he got there, this is in 1991, I think it was. It was around about the same time, of course. Well, 9 years before or something. Anyway, he moves the family there, and immediately they start receiving death threats and hate mail and hate phone calls. And he has his phone tapped and discovers that the man who's doing it is the high dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. And so he talks to his wife about what's happening, and he decides that instead of responding with fear and terror, he was going to respond with love. So he starts ringing the man, sending messages, kind messages, loving messages, and eventually discovers that the man has diabetes, he's dying, he's lost 2 legs, he has no one to care for him. And long story short, he turns up on the doorstep with his wife with a meal, and they take it in, and the man sort of breaks down in tears and pleads for their help to get out of the situation that he's in with the Ku Klux Klan. He leaves the Klan and eventually, would you believe, converts to Judaism because of the kindness and love he receives. So this is the brief poem that I've written, which asks a question. Kindness and the Klan, the story of a man who refused to be afraid and another who learned how to love. If only nations knew what Michael knew. If only we knew too. Threats of murder, death and destruction so freely sent to the Jewish cantor and his family. A Ku Klux Klan grand dragon consumed by hatred, overpowered not by the sword, but love. Oh, if only the war machines of our nations were silenced. If only we could stop shouting abuse at each other and respond as Michael did. If only we saw cold threats and cruel can never truly terrorize when faced with the greater power of love, care, and compassion. Kindness is such a dangerous power. Michael's miracle was to simply see what others couldn't. To see his mortal enemy was just a man, sick and alone, with no family to finally, kindly tend his needs. So his family bravely became his. Living in their home, dining at their table, embracing their faith and enjoying their laughter and tears. No longer a fiery dragon, but human through and through. He found a place to live and die in peace. If only nations. Yeah, I don't know. I think
there we are. You're back on. Yep.
We are back on. I think what's happening, let me explain quickly. You probably know this, but it's recording to your computer, your side of it, and my side to mine. So throughout, your audio to me hasn't been good and your video hasn't been good. But I'm hoping that when the merging happens, which normally fixes everything, it'll be fine. So even that part where I lost you, you're probably still recording.
Good.
I don't know whether you can pick up from where we stopped then.
Well, yes. Did you lose me? Did you hear the Marcus Aurelius quote?
No, I didn't, but I think it's probably recorded. But feel free to say it again if you like.
Well, I'm just making the point that the poem reflects the wisdom of the ages. Everyone from Marcus Aurelius to Michelle Obama. Aurelius said, the best revenge is to be completely unlike the person who wronged you. Yeah. And Michelle Obama said, when they go low, lie. In other words, don't match bad behavior with bad behavior. Then you've just got 2 people behaving badly. Match bad behavior with good behavior, as in the case of your poem. Respond to hate with kindness, and yes, more powerful than the sword.
We can only hope, can't we? We can only hope. And look, there are, as we said, there are wonderful examples throughout history and also in religion. There's wonderful examples of turning the other cheek and finding a way of kindness and love. In Australia at the moment, we have, like in many parts of the world, the rise of probably what we call the hard right, or we hear these loud protestations about how bad things are and how awful the other person is and all this sort of thing. I don't find it very helpful at all. What do you think? Why do you think people are responding like this? Why do you think they're supporting this kind of vitriol?
Yes, I think history has at least a partial answer, David, and that is that when societies become unequal, then the level of discontent becomes very widespread. I mean, in history, if they become too unequal, we have a revolution. But certainly, there are other factors involved, like there's the anti-immigration movement that seems to be sweeping the West very, very uncharitably and lacking in compassion. The underlying problem is inequality. Now, in Australia, for quite a long time, we kept the egalitarian dream alive. We thought of ourselves as a broadly middle-class society with a few rich people and a few poor people, but most of us were there in the middle. And really over the last 50 years, when there have been so many other social changes happening as well. One of them has been that we've become increasingly unequal, that there's been a huge concentration of wealth at the top, and we've now reached the stage where 3.5 million Australians, it's a minority, of course, but it's a huge minority, 3.5 million Australians live below the poverty line. Now, politicians are talking about how, well, we understand everyone's doing it tough. No, everyone is not doing it tough. The people at the top are not doing it tough at all, and some of the people in the middle are coping. They may notice their bills gone up, but they're coping all right. But the people at the bottom of the heap really are doing it tough, living below the poverty line, and we are remarkably ungenerous and unkind in our response to that. We're talking about tax reform, often including, well, almost always including talk of tax cuts. Well, what we need to be talking about is how are we going to address the massive problem of poverty, not just primarily through the taxation system. The wealthy obviously should be paying more tax, and much more support should be going to people living below the poverty line, because if we don't, we will become and it's happening, we will become a more divided society. There will be more anger, there will be more violence, there will be more extremism. It's not mysterious where that comes from. That poverty problem is a huge issue for us, not being properly addressed. The other problem that's relevant to this, I think, and makes people more vulnerable to extremist messages is the amount of time people are spending at the expense of social interaction, the neighbourhood, getting along, talking to people, having your mad ideas knocked out of you by people saying, don't be ridiculous, it's not like that, etc. All that really good social pressure that helps to keep us sane, that is now reduced because so many of us are spending so long with social media or in other online platforms where we are not socialising. We're exchanging messages, but we're isolating ourselves in the traditional human way, and that makes us more individualistic, more vulnerable to messages that fuel our feelings of discontent or anger or marginalisation or whatever it might be. It's anti-communitarian, even though in the technology sense we are connected. One reason I mentioned earlier in the conversation, one reason why young adults, 18 to 24, are our loneliest age cohort is that they are our most connected in the technology sense, and that's not a coincidence. But back to the poverty issue, David, I think we haven't yet come to terms with what a huge issue it is in Australia, and that it's everybody's problem. It's not just the problem of people struggling below the poverty line. It's our problem. Are we not being generous enough to charitable organisations, for example? Are we not paying people enough if they're working for us, whether in an organisation or cleaning our house or mowing our lawn or something? We've got those of us who are affluent have a duty to do what we can to alleviate poverty. And whenever we vote for more tax cuts for the rich, we're just making the situation worse.
We are making it worse. I couldn't agree more. And I think the answers are not actually too difficult. They just need courage, really, to make them happen. It's been really wonderful talking to you, Hugh. You've had so much to contribute to the well-being of our nation over your short life. I really want to thank you for that. And as I said, just going through the titles of your books, it gives a really good picture of where your heart has been over these years. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to be interviewing Craig Foster in July. Craig, as you know, was a leading soccer player, Socceroo, and went on to become an amazing advocate for people with
I've lost you again.
Refugees and others. So I'm really quite honoured to have him also. Are you still is a patron of one of the asylum seeker?
No longer actually the patron, although I am still very involved in it. It was the Asylum Seekers Centre in Sydney. I was patron of that for 10 years. They do a fantastic job.
Wow.
In looking after refugees and asylum seekers, helping find housing, employment, etc. So it's a wonderful organisation. And there are similar organisations in other states.
Look, there are lots of organisations and lots of that are doing fantastic things. The country we live in, we need to be grateful for, because there are so many things. I mean, my wife had a melanoma when she was about 30, received wonderful treatment that we could never have afforded at the time. And she's still alive now because of that. Our son, who's a corporate lawyer, could easily have died at the age of 19 or 20 because of a cancer that just wouldn't respond to treatment. And again, free treatment for that. I have a friend I went to school with who had multiple myeloma, and he's surprised everybody because I think he was only given something like 5 years, and he's gone through about 30, and now he's just gone through this amazing trial and the cancer has been eliminated. So, all his treatment was free. So, that's wonderful. But unfortunately, we are not valuing that and heading in the direction of recognising the points that you've made about that huge number of people living below the poverty line. And COVID taught us one thing, if nothing else, that, governments can make decisions to help keep the country going and to look after people.
Exactly.
And we need to, I think, revisit that. Hugh, I'd love to actually invite you again at some stage. I have so much to contribute. And once again, thank you so much for your time today.
Very great pleasure. Thank you, David.
Thanks for joining us for Love, Laughter and Kindness. Now, before you go, here's your kindness challenge for the week. Do one small act of kindness for someone who may never expect it. A smile, a message, a helping hand, a moment of laughter. Join us again for Love, Laughter and Kindness, and subscribe, please, to keep the conversation growing. Because together we can build a kinder world.